Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Decatur, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green, is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back with you.
Oh, man. How are you feeling? It's been almost exactly 24 hours since the biggest college football game of the season ended, with the Dawgs coming up just short of a all-time great comeback attempt on the road at Tuscaloosa. But how are you feeling 24 hours removed from Georgia, Alabama, Matt Green?
I will say it was a roller coaster of emotions, sir. It was quite the game Saturday night. That was one thing I mentioned to my family. It was like, why does Georgia have to lose such incredible games to Alabama? You know, no one remembers the regular losses. Everyone remembers these amazing games, and it's whether it's that SEC championship under Mark Richt, and it's the 2nd and 26 game, the Tua for Hurts and then Hurts for Tua. It's like there's been just a lot of just super memorable games. Obviously, Georgia did win one of those super memorable ones, but it doesn't seem like Georgia can just lose to Alabama. It's got to be in memorable fashion.
You got a national title out of it. I mean, you had a memorable pick six with Ringo. It's not like there's not some good memorable moments here. But to your point, it kind of reminds me, I don't know if I dropped it in the Thomas family group chat last night during the game, but it does kind of remind me of Tennessee, Florida, where it just feels like even when Georgia's had better rosters, better teams, they still come up short against Bama in really heart-wrenching ways. And it just feels like there's something about Georgia, Alabama that just, it's hard for Georgia to get over. It doesn't matter how good you feel about Georgia and how much better they seem on paper. It was the same with Tennessee year over year. It's just, it doesn't matter. I mean, Tennessee was favored going into Gainesville last year against a bad Florida team, and they obviously did not play well and lost that game. It just kind of reminds me of that, where Tennessee has found ways to lose to Florida in so many different ways in the 21st century, and they've been the better team going in a lot of those times. And it's just, how many times can you get kicked in the groin as a fan if you're a Tennessee or Georgia fan when it comes to Florida and Alabama this century?
No, and I get that, and it's like as a Georgia fan, you think a lot about the Florida rivalry under Mark Richt, those first however many years where he struggled to beat Florida, and obviously in the 90s, Florida was just straight up better than Georgia. But I think that's really what it is. It's not just like, oh man, regardless of how good we are, we can't beat this team. It's like, it's Alabama. It's like the whole country has had an Alabama problem for the last 15 years. So yeah, you think with some of these teams Georgia's had in recent years that they could have more success. But you look at these games, especially, it's like, we remember the blackout under Mark Richt, when Alabama just jumped on Georgia. Was it 31-0 at halftime? It's like, that's how this one felt for a while. But at the end, the result was very different. Like, you haven't seen many Kirby Smart games where the team comes out just looking flat. Like, it felt like a throwback to the Mark Richt days. But I mean, the fact that it ended the way it did and Georgia still had a chance to win this thing, took the lead in the fourth quarter, it was just, man, it was shocking, I would say, for what the game felt like. I mean, early second quarter, I think as most Georgia fans, I can probably speak for most Georgia fans, you're sitting there wondering, like, man, is our team whack this year? Like, is Georgia just not that good this year? Like, damn. Okay, I guess we got to recalibrate expectations. And then I think you saw with what happened in the second half, it's like, no, this team, nobody's just 28-0 better than Georgia. Like, I can't explain how that deficit happened. But Georgia came back and almost pulled the thing out.
Well, we can explain that. They scored in their first four possessions. That's what happened there, Matt Green, is the Alabama Crimson Tide scored touchdowns in their first four possessions. But
we haven't seen Alabama. I don't think I've ever seen Jaylen Milroe. Like, I'll straight up admit that we're dead wrong about Jaylen Milroe. Like, this guy has improved so much under Kalen DeBoer. Like, this guy looks even better. He hadn't had a game where he looked like the best player in college football until last night. Like, I'm giving that guy the Heisman Trophy if he has more games where he looked like he did for the first 2 quarters. And I'm drafting him first overall in the NFL. Like, with the way this man looked last night, I mean, he looked more like Lamar Jackson. I feel like last night, Jaylen Milroe looked like who everyone's tried to convince me Anthony Richardson is. Like, that's what Jaylen Milroe looked like. The dude is just a physical freak. And if he can consistently hit the intermediate passes and complete 80% of his passes, I mean, there's not much more you need to do on the football field if you're a quarterback. Like, that's pretty much it.
I would still lean Shedeur, and we'll get into Colorado and what they did on Saturday. I would still probably lean Shedeur if I had to like gamble on any of these quarterbacks in the first round, but because I just think arm talent. I'm still going to reside on arm talent and pocket mobility, and he looks more apt to. I think Jaylen Milroe is going to be more who drafts him based. Like, it just seems like he's going to be a luck of the draw there. Depends on where he ultimately goes in terms of whether or not he makes it. It just feels to me like Shedeur is more likely to pan out on more teams than Jaylen Milroe. I think Jaylen Milroe probably has more upside if it all hits, but I think Shedeur Shedeur just strikes me as a higher floor and less variance depending on who drafts him in the top of next year's draft. But we have a long way before we get to that.
And that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, Lamar. It's like with Lamar Jackson. It's like you just have to commit. Like, you have to commit. You're not going to run the same type of offense as anyone else in the NFL. Like, because you're doing the Lamar Jackson thing. It's like, I don't know, man. I think Jaylen Milroe looks like he's taken a pretty huge step forward this year.
I mean, I think Jaylen Milroe, what we saw on Saturday, and then there's a way to tie this into Tennessee here, Matt Green. But from what I saw, you still can't discount the USF game. And I think something that people have to consider is, it was at home. The second half, Jaylen Milroe did not have as much success as he did in the first half. And he started off as hot as any quarterback has started against Georgia in a long time. But I still don't think this is going to be weekly. And this is kind of how I want to tie this in. So one of my notes that I jotted down and how I think I dropped in the Tennessee Ball Sports Guys chat was, I think after watching that game and then rewatching a lot of it this morning and checking stuff out this afternoon, the thing that I go back to is I actually feel a lot more confident that Tennessee is going to beat Bama at home. And I feel less confident about Tennessee at Georgia and Athens. I think one of the things, and this is how we can tie it to Tennessee here, the way that Alabama jumped on Georgia, I don't think is possible against Tennessee. I think Tennessee plays a very different style, especially defensively, than what Georgia was doing. Like, Georgia was very active on the edge, right? They were blitzing a lot. They were very, very aggressive, trying to get after Jaylen Milroe early, and he was just burning him. Like, Alabama was just burning him to the edges, and they were just, like, they looked slow. Like, Georgia did not look like they could handle Milroe, Miller, and company getting to the edge. Ryan Williams and stuff, that happened in the second half, but it was still mostly the Jaylen Milroe show in the first half, and a lot of good scheme stuff from Kalen DeBoer. But what I took away from that is, if you watch Tennessee and Tim Banks' style and what Tennessee is good at specifically, is I don't think Jaylen Milroe is going to be able to navigate like that in Knoxville. I don't think he's going to have that opportunity, because Tim Banks is a lot, like, he will dial up some blitzes, but it's still a lot of keep stuff in front of him defense, and he's not going to send the house early. It's a lot of, like, we're going to see what kind of pressure we can get home with 4 on the front 7, and Tennessee's got really, really strong linebacker play right now with Peely and Carter. Like, something I took away from this game, if you're a Tennessee Vol fan, is I think Milroe is going to have a lot of problems when he comes to Knoxville. I would now be very surprised if Alabama is able to come anywhere close to that kind of offensive efficiency in Knoxville next month. But Georgia deserves a lot of credit for how they clamped Bama down in the second half and didn't give up and that kind of thing. I just don't think Bama can play that way, and I don't think Tim Banks and his style is going to have the same game plan that Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart had against Milroe. It's just two different defenses. And I think what Milroe did against Georgia in the first half to gash them, I don't think is possible against Tennessee. And I still question what happens when Milroe is under pressure, when Milroe, if the offensive line doesn't step up, if Milroe has some fumbling stuff with the center. Like, I think Milroe is a lot better than you and I thought coming into the year, but I still think we're going to have some ups and downs. And I still think Tennessee's going to beat this Alabama team when they come to Knoxville. But I look at Georgia when they still go, when Tennessee goes there. It's just one of the things that Bama has that Tennessee does not yet is Ryan Williams is an absolute freak at 17. Like, he's just a game wrecker. He's the most talented Bama receiver since Julio Jones. Like, he is an immediate number one, first wide receiver taken when he is draft eligible at this current pace and doing stuff that just true freshmen should not be able to do, and made Julian Humphrey look silly on that final game-winning catch. The thing is, Tennessee right now, I mean, I'm a big Mike Matthews guy, true 5-star out of Parkview. We'll see if he's a factor in the rotation by that point against Georgia. But Tennessee, to this point, has really struggled with the receivers getting open against Georgia's secondary. I think you saw kind of that recipe was mobility at the edge. Tennessee is not going to run Nico like Alabama was running Jaylen Milroe to the outside. That's not going to happen. And the other part is I just think the way to beat Georgia, most teams don't have these kind of guys, which is the Ryan Williams unicorn receivers who can get open at will and make these really, really good Georgia secondary players look silly from time to time. And that was a game breaker. And I think Tennessee, it might have to be Chris Brazzell, maybe true freshman 5-star Mike Matthews, maybe Brew or Dante Thornton. Maybe by that point, because we still got 2 months before that game just about. I don't know. I came away from this game feeling a lot better about Tennessee beating Alabama next month, and I felt pretty shaky about going into Athens because I think the way Alabama beat Georgia, I'm not sure Tennessee can play that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I don't look at Ryan Williams as this, the best receiver they've had since Julio or anything like that. My biggest criticism of Alabama the past couple years is just they haven't had that elite first-round pick. Because, like, you could say he's the best since Devontae Smith, or Jalen Waddle, or Calvin Ridley, or Amari Cooper. It's like they've had so many studs. That was my biggest criticism. Like I said, in 2022, 2023, we just didn't see that elite Alabama first-round pick. Like, LSU seems to lose them and replace them like every single year, and Alabama was like that they had 2 or 3 on a roster at a time there for like 5-6 years. And Ryan Williams appears to be that guy. I think even the other playmakers, they just scare you more than a Jermaine Burton did a year ago. They just had a couple good receivers, but they didn't have anyone that just really scared you. And Ryan Williams, I mean, this dude's obviously, it's going to be said, it's been said a million times, it's going to be said a million more. He's 17 years old. Like, that's just pretty absurd that he should be in high school right now. And he's out there, I think he had 7 targets in this game, and he had like 6 for 170, I want to say. Came in averaging 28 yards a catch, and he raised that in the game against Georgia. But no, I think it's just, I think this Alabama offense looks a lot more dangerous. But I mean, I think that what Tennessee and others will probably benefit from is just showing how not to attack Jaylen Milroe for a quarter and a half is what you saw from Georgia. Like, they did kind of full out blitz, and they thought like that's the way to disrupt this guy is we have to get pressure. And they did get pressure. They never got to him. They got pressure early, but there was always someone open to just dump it off to. And you saw big play, just chunk play after chunk play. And when he wasn't, he was running for 40 yards for a touchdown himself. But you saw in the second half, Georgia did not, put pressure on or did not come after Milroe the way they did in the first half, and they had a lot more success. They stopped him after they went down 28-0. Alabama had 3 points on their next 8 possessions, and so that was a great stat for Georgia to get back in this game. Unfortunately, Alabama got 9 possessions in this game after they went up 28-0, and that one 75-yard play was all it took to pull this one out.
Yeah, and there's more I want to get into with this too. But, I mean, the other thing to put a bow on, like, how I tie it in with Tennessee is Milroe had 16 carries for 117 yards, 2 TDs. He was all the rushing offense. I mean, Justice Haynes couldn't run on Georgia. Jam Miller, 5 carries, 8 yards. It was really just Jaylen Milroe. it's just not going to happen. Like I just Tennessee's rush defense is not going to allow Jaylen Milroe to do that. Like I'm just, especially at home in Knoxville. So I just think the recipe for Alabama to beat Tennessee in Knoxville, I don't think it's there. Right now, I think Tennessee fans should feel really good about what Bama looked like, because Bama, again, part of it was just that amazing start that really bailed them out. And this, I think I was listening to Richard Johnson on Split Zone Duo, that like if this game lasted a few more minutes, then Georgia probably wins this game. And the game was kind of trending away from Alabama. Alabama was lucky to kind of get out of there with a win, because the second half was a totally different story than what we saw in the first half, and the kind of hole that Georgia dug themselves in. But I mean, Ryan Williams, 6 catches, 177 yards. But you look around, CJ Dippre, tight end, 4 catches, 38. Manuel Henderson, 1 catch. Jeremy Bernard, 5 catches for 25. Kendrick Law, 1 for 19. Kobe Prentice, 2 for 15. That's just not gonna. It's not gonna be enough. Like if I don't think they have as much juice as it looked in this game. Come to Knoxville here next month. I feel really good about how Tennessee matches up against Alabama. I have a lot more questions about how Tennessee's going to handle Georgia in Athens, because I think they got a lot better. They got hit in the mouth. They are going to be desperate because Georgia now has to win 2 of 3 against Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Texas to make the playoff. They have to win 2 of those next 3. So they have one more mulligan, I guess, kind of, and this wasn't even really a mulligan, but this is going to be a very focused, a very angry, a very inspired Georgia team that we have not seen in a little bit, because their backs are a little bit against the wall now with this early regular season loss. But to kind of put the other part to put a bow on it with Tennessee, Matt Green, do you think now that you saw this game play out, does it feel like UGA is still on the same tier as Texas and Tennessee right now atop the SEC? Do you think they're in the same tier based on what you saw? Do you like how much of it was just they responded really well in the second half, so I don't think the sky is falling? Because I think a lot of Georgia fans were like, sky is falling. Like that horrible start where, okay, not only was Kentucky way more troublesome than we realized, we might have real problems. I think Carson Beck was really, really bad for the majority of this game, and the offense was just very up and down. Defense was kind of hit or miss. They got better, like we said, as the game went on. Malachi Starks had a rough night, from what I could tell. Julian Humphrey obviously had a rough night at corner. It did feel a little bit different. Georgia felt a little bit more beatable than they have in a long time. Does it feel like they're on that same tier as Tennessee and Alabama and Texas after this game?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm anybody other than a Georgia fan, like I'm not taking away like your takeaway in terms of them looking more beatable. Like I'm thinking Alabama looked a hell of a lot better today than I thought they were going into yesterday. Like I think this Alabama team, like I don't think they're on a different tier than Georgia. I think, you saw how the second half went. I mean, obviously Alabama got a little more conservative once they went up, but it's not like they put the brakes on. It's like they ended up, Georgia took the lead late in the fourth quarter in this game. So it wasn't like it was just some garbage time and the score looked closer than it was. Like I think Alabama, like in the second half, like Georgia was the better team, like significantly better. What was it, 27-11, and Georgia outscored Alabama in the second half in this game. Like I think, yeah, if you're Georgia, there's a lot of things to be like worried about in terms of this schedule is not getting any easier. I think it's very possible that Alabama is the best team on this schedule, but I don't know. I think if I'm Texas or Tennessee, like I can't watch Saturday night and think, oh, this definitely means we're better than Georgia. Like this might mean, oh shit, Alabama might be a little better than we thought.
Maybe. Like I said, I feel really good about Bama now. I don't think Milroe is going to have a fun time at Knoxville. It's just my guess. Like right now, it's September 29th. I think Tennessee will end up being favored, and I think Tennessee will be okay against Alabama. Line up to like 14.5 against Arkansas this week. I think Florida line might be 20 plus.
Alabama's not Arkansas and Florida though. That's a different breed.
I watched Bryce Young have to do a whole heck of a lot to keep Alabama in the fold, and a lot of stuff moving around the pocket with Tennessee is also a different animal at home. Heupel's lost 1 home game since 2022, the start of 2022 season. I don't know. My gut is Tennessee should beat this Alabama team. I think people are going to overreact to Alabama and overreact to Georgia after this game. And what I think is probably I could eat my words here, Matt Green, but right now I think Tennessee and Texas are in their own tier atop the SEC, Ooh. And I think Georgia and Alabama are in the tier below. That's just where I think things are right now.
Interesting.
But we shall see. And you could also sell me on Texas being in their own tier, Tennessee being in their own tier, and then the tier slightly below Tennessee would be Georgia and Alabama. Like, you could sell me on that.
Texas didn't exactly they didn't look like, world beaters against Mississippi State for 3 quarters. I don't know. I'm wanting to see Mississippi State or see Texas and Tennessee against those other big time SEC teams before you really draw any conclusions about them.
That's fair. Well, let's dive into this game specifically here, Matt Green, because I guess my biggest question to you to start off was, Carson Beck is just really hard to evaluate now, right? Because I think so many Georgia fans were out and like, oh, he needs to return his Lamborghini and all this stuff. I don't know what it was like in your household and with the Green family, with the roller coaster that was Carson Beck, because I think it's true for fans who are like, or any analysts, writers, and everything else. Like, I've just read so many pieces and all over this game. And I think it is true that Georgia does not get back in this game without Carson Beck. But also, Georgia is not in this horrible situation if Carson Beck does not have the kind of game. Like the safety, that's his fault, throwing it up. I mean, some bad interceptions. Some were his fault, some were not. Like, Arian Smith ran the wrong route. That should have been a screen, and he goes downfield, and that was a pick for Alabama. But Carson Beck it was rough. And it was rough enough in the first half where you wondered if Gunnar Stockton was going to be the starter coming out of the tunnel in the second half. I mean, how much of, like, what did you think of Carson Beck's ultimate performance? What were you thinking in the first half when it looked like borderline yip stuff, Matt Green? Like a predicted number 1 overall pick having an all-time bad half.
I will say, and I might not be speaking for all Georgia fans, I was never once thinking about putting Gunnar Stockton in this game, or Jaden Rashada in this game. But this was what the unfortunate part was to me, which the one part I disagree with you. I think they were down 21-0 before Carson Beck played poorly. Like, so you look at this first possession of the game, obviously Alabama scored so easily on the opening drive, and then Georgia gets it. Georgia clearly had a game plan in this game, and it was that our receivers are better than Alabama's corners, and they wanted to take as many one-on-one matchups downfield. I don't think I've ever seen Georgia with this many shots downfield in one game. It was kind of insane, and I think it's because they wanted to get those corners on an island. So you see the first play of the game, that looked more like 2023 Carson Beck. We just had that nice, like, wide open 15-yard across the middle to Lovett, just kind of get the offense going. And then the second play, Beck drops an absolute dime down the sideline to Arian Smith. Like, if Arian Smith falls down right where he catches it, that's a gain of 50, and he might keep going for a touchdown. And so if Carson Beck gets his feet under him like that and gets the crowd out of it a little bit, Georgia it's a heavyweight fight, just two heavyweights throwing haymakers. It's just a kind of a completely different vibe early. And then after just a perfect throw that Arian Smith drops, you have the 3rd and 6 where Beck puts another one right on the money where Dominic Lovett gets the offensive pass interference. So it's like that just kind of kills Georgia's first drive where Beck actually was throwing well. And then they go down 14-0. And then, like you said, clearly they check to a screen. And that screen, unfortunately, looked like it could have been open, too. You had multiple offensive linemen out there. Everyone was running a screen except for Arian Smith, which is important because he was the intended receiver. And that ball gets picked off. And then all of a sudden, Georgia's down 20. They get like a 20-yard field, and Georgia's down 21-0. And I feel like Beck actually looked good early on. And now at 21-0 in the second quarter, I've never seen Carson Beck play so poorly. Like, that interception he threw at midfield, did he not see the linebacker? I have no idea. Like, I've never seen, I don't think I've seen an interception that bad from Carson Beck. And then after Georgia actually gets a stop there late in the second quarter, I mean, that the first play Georgia takes over, like, that should have been a pick 6. Deontay Lawson, I want to say, could have walked in for like a 5-yard pick 6. Like, I don't know what was happening with Carson Beck in the second quarter, because that was one of the turning points in the game. I thought that second interception, because Georgia gets the 4th down stop, down 28-7, 3 minutes left in the second quarter. You're at the 40 or so. You could put together like a 60-yard drive, 2-3 minutes. Then you come back and you get the ball at halftime. Like, there was a legitimate chance for Georgia to get back in the game early. So to throw that pick like he did, that was just that just totally took the wind out of Georgia's sails. But the intentional grounding, sir, that's an awful call. He throws it 40. Look at the play again. He throws the ball. The ball lands at the 40-yard line. Dylan Bell, who just got shoved, is at the 30-yard line when it lands. Overthrows him by 10 yards. Like, we all see who the intended receiver is. Like, it's not intentional grounding. Like, we know what he's doing. He's throwing it deep to where he has an intended receiver. He's probably getting rid of it before he wants to because he's under pressure. That's football. Like, that changed the game. Like, that was an absolute garbage call. Like, I haven't heard one person explain to me how a 40-yard pass on a guy who's a ball that lands at the 40-yard line when the guy intended receiver's at the 30, how that's not a receiver in the area. Like, I don't understand that call at all. And if you look at how that changed the just complexion of the game, Alabama scores 5 touchdowns and a field goal in this game. Georgia scores 5 touchdowns in this game. Because of the safety, they start going for 2 and not going for 2. Like, that kind of changed the complexion of the points. But 5 touchdowns and a field goal, and Georgia scored 5 touchdowns. Georgia has the ball at the end of the game. They're down 3 and only need a field goal to force overtime or maybe a touchdown to win it. I just feel like that safety totally changes the complexion of the game. And I watch football every Saturday. I just don't see that call made. Like, we all saw who the intended receiver was. It was the guy that was running down the sideline who also got shoved. So he wasn't at the 40 because, and I'm not even saying it should be pass interference or anything. It's an uncatchable ball, but we all saw who the intended receiver was.
Even still, with all that being said with Beck, he has some big time downfield throws. It was a lot of just throwing it up. It wasn't like they were just great dimes. He was throwing darts in the second half. He was just throwing the ball up and trying to make plays downfield, and the receivers were making, like, Colby Young, I think, should probably start going forward. I think Colby Young really flashed in the fourth quarter for Tennessee, or for Georgia, excuse me. I thought Colby Young popped a little bit. Obviously, people are going to look at the Dylan Bell touchdown to go ahead and all that, but I thought he played really well. I mean, Arian Smith had an all-time bad first half, too. Like, you look at a lot of the mistakes there. The drop, it reminded me of the Ramel Keaton drop. The first, I think it was like maybe the third play of the game, or it was early on against Virginia last year. Ramel Keaton had a huge drop from a Joe Milton bomb, and it never was the same for Ramel the rest of the year. And I don't know, it's just receivers are tricky like that, where it's just a bad drop and then you saw what happened after that. It seemed like it was it was an avalanche of issues after that big time drop from Arian.
And Arian Smith had a really good game after that too.
But that's what I'm saying. Well, not even after that drop. It was the second half. Like, he had multiple, like, the interception was his fault. Like, there was some other thing. Arian Smith had a up and down game, kind of like Carson, but like you said, the second half, I think Arian played a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, he had his kind of one-on-one deep shot that he won with that long reception near the end of the game. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a big misnomer personally coming into this game, was that Georgia doesn't have any playmakers out wide. Like, Georgia has playmakers out wide. I can't really explain why the Kentucky game happened the way it is. You know, Kentucky doesn't suck as bad as we thought, right? So Kentucky's a little bit better, but it was still a really bad offensive performance. And I don't know, the offensive line was getting blown up. It's hard to explain why that Kentucky performance was so bad, because that's another thing I think it's being overlooked a little bit. Like, Georgia was down 28-0. They basically gave up on the run game after the first quarter. So, I mean, Carson Beck dropped back 50 times. He was sacked a couple times, like, early in the game. But for dropping back 50 times in this game, he was basically not really under pressure in the second half. So I think Georgia did protect Beck pretty well. But, I mean, and yeah, he's the reason they got back in this game. He was actually, you know, the offense was explosive. The downfield passing game looked really good to get them back in the game. But I don't know what happened in that second quarter. And Colby Young, yeah, he's looked good. He's a big body receiver. That's kind of his thing, is, you know, catching those back shoulders, those contested catches. Unfortunately, I feel like he probably could have done more on that final interception. But I think more than anything, that's just Beck. He's got to put that closer to the sideline. It's got to be, you know, Colby Young's got leverage. Like, I'm not trying to be the referees, you know, did Georgia in guy, but that intentional grounding, I felt like was a massive play. And I mean, the offensive pass interference calls were just phantom calls. Like, I watch football every day, and I see rub routes all the time. It has to be obvious if you're going to call a rub route for pass interference. Like, that's it. Dude's just running his route, and the DB creates the contact. Like that's not offensive pass interference. And I swear, I'm going to sound like the bitter Georgia fan. I don't see that get called on anybody else. I go back to the 2017 SEC championship game where Terry Godwin, and it was some just phantom offensive pass interference call. Whatever. That's not the reason Georgia lost, but I feel like because Georgia disrespected Alabama's corners, I feel like Alabama's corners got about a quarter of how many pass interferences as they could have gotten in this game. Like you just saw over and over, Alabama's corners were not playing the ball. They didn't really know where the ball was, just kind of playing the man. And a couple times they got called for it, but I don't know, with the amount that they were just kind of getting abused out wide, I feel like they could have gotten twice as many pass interference calls.
How much of this, I mean, you're a Bobo guy. How much of this falls on the Bobo game plan? Were you, and like maybe this is a two-parter, like combining what happened to Georgia defensively, because I think a lot of Georgia fans, from what I read and saw, like not really happy about Chaz Chambliss in this game, not really happy about some of the snap counts, because I was going through a lot of the snaps counts for Georgia. One of the things I thought was interesting was Lawson Lucky outsnapped Oscar Delp in a significant way. He had an amazing catch in the end zone at one point. Was that the 2-point conversion or was that a touchdown? I don't remember which one was that.
Yeah, that was a touchdown.
Yeah.
I think he did have a 2-point conversion also, actually.
Okay. He was good, but I think they figured out, because remember, this is part of growing in this season anyway, is Georgia, I think, it took him a while, because what did I say this offseason? I was like, I think Georgia fans just think that Oscar Delp, like everything I've seen from Delp is just like, he's not a star. Like he's just he's not the next Bowers, Darnell Washington, NFL type guy. I don't see it with him. Lawson Lucky
Darnell Washington, you can't even put him in the same conversation.
No, he had a great play today. I don't know if you saw, he jumped over another guy, a Colts player this afternoon. I did see that. But Lawson Lucky is a much more dynamic player, and obviously receiver too. Ben Urasek, I think, did not grade well for Georgia. He struggled in block and pass protection. But it's like, if Delp's now back to number 2, and Lawson Lucky should probably be starting at this point, is probably your best tight end option this year. Like, you're figuring some stuff out. I think if you're Georgia, you're figuring out, okay, Lawson Lucky, let's go with him. We put too much on Oscar Delp's plate, this, that, and the other. Colby Young, okay, he did some stuff with his limited snap counts. Anthony Evans out wide, I think, showed some stuff. I think Anthony Evans should be someone Georgia plays and factors into the wide receiver rotation now. I think you kind of have to go through some adversity and also just kind of see what you have. The one thing I don't understand is Nate Frazier, who was so good early on, no snaps in this game. Like, what did you think with Cash Jones having a crazy amount of snaps for Georgia in this ball game? Like, Cash Jones is fine, but Trevor Etienne and Cash Jones basically got all the Georgia snaps. Branson Robinson had like a carry or two, but I thought that was really strange to me, was how Georgia handled the running back rotation. And like you said, maybe part of it was just they got in such a hole early they couldn't stick to the plan. But with everything we've seen from Nate Frazier, I don't really understand why he has not been a factor the last 2 weeks for the Dogs.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, Nate Frazier is just subpar in pass protection. And you saw Cash Jones basically every third down. Cash Jones was the running back in Georgia's offense. Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a surprise. You can be, gut reaction and call for Bobo's job, whatever. You can do that if you want. This was a full team performance that got down 28-0. Like, I don't think it was all on the defense. Defense didn't do a very good job. Like they just, those first 3 drives were just easy. Like I mean, at least the one, was it the 4th touchdown that they at least got to the fourth and 1 that they forced Alabama, and then Milroe breaks like the 40-yard touchdown. But I feel like the offense just not sustaining any drives whatsoever. Just like, what was it? No first downs in the first 3 or 4 drives they had the ball. Like, it was a full team effort to get down 28-0 as early as they did. I mean, but you saw what the game plan was. So, I mean, you hang 34 on Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium. I mean, it's hard to put that on Mike Bobo, especially when at least one of the interceptions you see, like we talked about, Arian Smith running the wrong route, like Carson Beck at the end. I mean, obviously late games, like, interceptions happen, whatever. It wasn't a perfect throw. Like, I mean, I'm not putting that on Mike Bobo. So, I mean, I just, more than anything, I feel like you have to be impressed with Alabama's offense and their big playability. I think this year they just look a lot more legit. Like, I'm not going to be, I literally made a comment, I think, watching the game last year, like, cue the message board geniuses of, oh, it's because he's driving a Lamborghini and dating an Instagram model. That's why he's not focused like Stetson was, yada, yada. Stetson wasn't even focused on class. He was that dialed in to football. But no, I don't buy into any of that. Carson Beck, I think Carson Beck is still one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football. I don't rank him near the top like I once did because he just hasn't looked like that all year. So I think the second quarter was as bad as I've seen him look. But I think in the second half, I think the second half reminded people, okay, yeah, this is why Georgia is a national title contender. Like, this team is still really damn good. I think you go down 28-0, turn the ball over 4 times in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and you still have a lead with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I mean, I think that right there tells you that this Georgia team is able to win in a couple different ways. You know what I mean? Obviously, they didn't find a way to win this game, but I think that shows you how dangerous of a team they are. I mean, they didn't score. They scored 1 offensive touchdown last week 2 weeks ago against Kentucky, and they find a way to win that game. So it's like, I'm not like trying to, put lipstick on a pig here or anything. Like, Georgia should not be encouraged in terms of, what they've been for the first 5 weeks of the season. It's going to be a little more difficult than maybe you thought it was going to be preseason. But I mean, I think ultimately you look at what this Georgia team was. It was a tale of 2 halves, and Georgia went 5 for 5 on 4th downs in this game. And it was honestly more like 7 for 7 because I think there was at least a couple defensive pass interferences that happened on 4th down. Each of those plays, I mean, you talk about each of those, how much pressure is on each one of those 4th down conversions. Basically, all of those plays were, okay, if Georgia doesn't convert here, ball game's probably over. And then they convert. And it's like, okay, maybe we're alive for a few more minutes. And then they were able to get stops on Jaylen Milroe in the second half. And I don't know. Obviously, it looks like Alabama changed their game plan in the second half for some reason. And they weren't calling it felt like Jaylen Milroe hero ball in the first half. And it was like, just let this guy run around and make plays. And Georgia wasn't able to stop it. In the second half, it felt like they took the ball out of his hands just way too much.
I also just think Georgia cleaned some stuff up. Like, I think Georgia just had a really good game plan in the second half and figured some stuff out. I don't know. I think you look at this game and we could kind of flip back to it here, Matt Green. It's just that I'm curious now, after the loss, the streak's over, first loss since 2020 for Kirby here in the regular season. Are you confident that they are going to be able to bounce back and that Georgia is ultimately going to be fine going forward?
I mean, define fine, like that this team, I mean, I don't think you can relax if you're a Georgia fan. Like we talked about, this was going to be like the toughest 7-game stretch maybe in the history of Georgia football we've seen. Might have gotten slightly easier with Ole Miss getting upset, but this is going to be a gauntlet. You got at least 3 top 5 teams on the schedule this, as well as Ole Miss, as well as some rivalry games with Florida and Auburn. So you hate to lose the first game of that tough stretch, but I mean, there's also a chance that that's the toughest game of this stretch. So, I mean, it's not going to be easy, but I think if you're Georgia, I'm not anointing Texas and Tennessee to be as good as this Alabama team, right? So far through 5 weeks. I don't think they've proven that. So, I mean, we'll see. Those teams could be better than Alabama and Georgia could lose 3 games. Like, who knows? But I mean, I think you saw what this team is made of. And I think this is what you talked about with culture, to be honest. Like, everyone loves to talk about the speeding tickets and, oh, Georgia's a bunch of criminals down there. It's like, no, this is what culture is. Culture is going down 28-0 in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and the team didn't give up. You just battle your way back. Things aren't going well, especially like there's the fumble too. We haven't even mentioned among all the other mistakes that Carson Beck made. It just felt like there were so many mistakes. It was like, okay, yep, That's the one that's going to do them in. And this game is pretty much over. And they just kept responding and they kept bouncing back, kept getting stops, and the defense kept getting off the field. So I think that's really what the culture of Georgia is. And it's like, you gotta completely bury them. Like, you can't just knock them out. They just kept bouncing back and bouncing back. The schedule is going to get a lot tougher, but I mean, I think you have to at least be encouraged from what you saw in the second half of that. I mean, they go down 14-0, 17-0, and they can win this game. You spot anyone 28 points, you're not going to win many of those games. And turn the ball over 4 times. Like, it went about as bad as it could possibly go, and you still somehow had a lead, only briefly, but you did have a lead with about 2 minutes and 45 seconds left in this ball game.
Does it feel like to you this team is going to still make the playoff, and they're going to be able to take care of business to get to 10-2 or an 11-1 and still make the playoff, maybe in the SEC title game?
Yeah, I think you should definitely not be giving up on all the goals that Georgia had coming into this season. Like, obviously the playoff format gives you a little bit of a room for error there, a lot more room for error. But I mean, I think this team can definitely still get back to the SEC championship. That's one of the blessings and the curses of this schedule. Like, yeah, it's tough, but when that Alabama game, when the clock hit triple zeros, you knew that Georgia was still, in control of their own destiny, because they're going to play Texas, because they're going to play Tennessee. They don't have to sit back and hope for whatever happens around the conference. Like, they're going to be in control of it themselves. So that's the positive. The negative is that, but those really good teams are on your schedule still. And there's less room for error after dropping one of these games already.
Well, I'll put a bow on it there. Across the SEC, Matt Green, Kentucky stuns Ole Miss. What, I think we might have different takeaways here too, as well. What did you make of Kentucky, with another prayer at Jordan Hare, sir? But this time for Kentucky and Brock Vandegrift to bury on Brown down the left-hand side on 4th and long. That ultimately puts Kentucky in position to steal one against Ole Miss here. But what did you make of Kentucky knocking off the Ole Miss Rebels here on Saturday afternoon?
Oh, I cannot compare it to the prayer at Jordan Hare. That was just some flukiness that I don't know if we'll ever see again. Although we almost saw it with Ryan Williams batting the ball up to himself on that gain of like 50 or something he had in that Georgia-Alabama game.
I mean, I think it was pretty fluky, man. Just thinking about Brock Vandegrift and the odds of him hitting that big downfield shot. I don't know. I think
he just caught it. There was no like deflections or anything. I just mean the whole like two safeties coming together. The ball gets topped in the air. Dude's like turn around, doesn't know. Prayer Jordan Hare's all-time flukiness. But no. I think this is what my biggest concern was about the Ole Miss Rebels. And that's why the first thing I texted you on Saturday when this happened was, can we officially just stop putting any value whatsoever in these 60-point, 70-point explosions versus these cupcake opponents? Like, this Ole Miss offense is not the best offense in college football. Like, we saw what Georgia did against Kentucky a couple weeks ago. Granted, it was at Kentucky instead of a home game. So I'm not just saying Ole Miss is a garbage team because they only scored 17 points versus Kentucky. But it shows that, I think it was Connor O'Gara or somebody was like, Trey, why am I blanking on his name? Trey Harris?
Trey
wide
Harris.
Receiver?
Mm-hmm.
Trey Harris? I'm blanking. Wow. He was like 80 yards away from setting a college football record for most receiving yards before the month of October or something. And it's like, cool. He hasn't played one team with a pulse. Like, I don't care. I don't care that Jackson Dart has 1,500 yards passing in the first 4 games or whatever he had. Like, it was a bunch of nothing. Like, yeah, you scored a bunch of points versus Middle Tennessee State and Furman. Like, congratulations. You saw when they had to face a legit SEC opponent, and Kentucky's not even some sort of powerhouse either. This is just a team with a legit SEC defensive line. And you saw they got after Jackson Dart, and they made it very hard on this Ole Miss offense the whole way. So, yeah, I felt like Ole Miss felt a little bit, hollow. Like, it was just something I wasn't sure about what we saw from this team and kind of what their DNA is. And to drop this game versus Kentucky, now I'm wondering about the outlook for the entire season.
I think Jackson Dart played a really rough game. I think ultimately Kentucky kind of stuck to the same script they used to beat Georgia, or excuse me, come up just short against Georgia 2 weeks prior.
It felt like a loss. That's why you said beat Georgia.
Yeah, it did really. I mean, it was wild, but they played the same script. They ultimately get a victory over Ole Miss in this way. But I think people are going to overreact here a little bit, Matt Green, because Brock Vandagriff was really bad in this game. This Kentucky offense was still awful. They had ball control. Like Kentucky's got 2 NFL players.
To good Kentucky or bad Ole Miss?
I just think people are, because I've seen like they're kind of now getting compared to Iowa. The thing about that is Iowa is a top 5 scoring offense or scoring defense. Like Iowa is an elite scoring defense, year in, year out. This is, I don't know if you can get away with that in the SEC. Like you can get away with that in the Big Ten and still somehow win 10 games sometimes when you're Iowa and you play like that. And Iowa fans have wanted that to go away forever. Like they've been very tired of it for many years now, with a new OC now this year with Lester, and it's still not going all that much better for the Hawkeyes in terms of offense. But I think people are now looking at this of like, oh, redemption for Kentucky. Kentucky's going to get blasted when they come to Tennessee in a couple weeks. Like they are going to get run out of the Neyland Stadium here in a couple weeks. I think Kentucky is still like, this is a team that got boat raced by South Carolina, and a much better South Carolina team than I think you and I both thought coming into the year. But Kentucky's not good. I just think they sometimes will drag some people to the mud, and you're going to have these weird results. And you're like, how did Kentucky do that? I don't think it's a guarantee Kentucky's a bowl team. Like, I think now I've heard people, like, so much on the broadcast after us, Kentucky's good. Kentucky's offense is still an absolute train wreck. To be a good team, when people are saying, like, they're a good team, both sides of the ball matter. Kentucky's offense is still really bad, Matt Green. Like, Brock Vandagriff is not good. Kentucky's offense is still really bad. They're 113th now in scoring through, in passing offense through 5 games now. Let's see here. Yards per attempt for Kentucky. They are, I'm still scrolling. Where is Kentucky? I can't find them off the top. Where are they? There's Iowa at 122. Michigan at 130. Kansas back here. Where did Kentucky go on yards per attempt?
See, but how does this segment turn into a bashing Kentucky segment?
Because like, everyone's looking at 76. Sorry, 76. They have 4 touchdowns, 3 picks this year passing the football. This is not a good offense. This is a really, really bad offense that they're finding ways with this great defense to not do anything with, because the offense is a mess all over again. You have multiple NFL guys on this defense. You actually have a pretty talented wide receiver group here with Barryon and company, but this is just an awful offense, Matt Green. And Ole Miss didn't get up off the mat here, and it's a bad home loss for them, but Kentucky played them well last time they were in Oxford. I'm not excusing anything. Ole Miss should have won this football game, but I think coming out after everyone just being like, Kentucky's actually good. This team could very well lose to Vanderbilt in 2 weeks. Like, I think that's very much in play.
I am very surprised at the direction this is going. Everything you said about Kentucky, that's who Ole Miss just lost to. Like, that's an indictment on Ole Miss to lose to that team. Like, Kentucky, this game went to perfectly to script. Like, almost 40 minutes of time of possession, basically doubled Ole Miss's time of possession in this game. Like, that's kind of what they have to be. They kind of, muck it up, bring you down in the mud with them, and just play this ugly game. But like, they had 22 first downs to Ole Miss's 14 in this game. Like, Ole Miss was supposed to be this great offense, number 1 offense in college football coming in, and Kentucky absolutely just stonewalled them. Like, held them to under 100 yards rushing. Like, I think the takeaway should be, maybe Kentucky's not good, but this Ole Miss team doesn't look good at all. Like, I feel like you have to have more negative opinions of Ole Miss coming out of this game than you do Kentucky.
I just think Ole Miss is going to be a bad loss, but I think Ole Miss is going to be fine. I still think they're going to challenge for 9 to 10 wins and be right there. I don't think the sky is falling. They got blown out 31-6 at home by South Carolina. They scored 12 points against Georgia. They scored 20 here, and it was barely 20 with that last play and the prayer from Brock Vandagriff to get to that 20. This is an awful awful offense. And I just think people are like, they're actually good. And
so what makes you think Ole Miss is good?
I just think Ole
the
Miss
box score versus Furman?
I just think Ole Miss, way more talent. I'm still going to bet on they just had a bad day. I'm just going to say in the rain and not getting up and playing cupcakes for 4 weeks, I just think Ole Miss is going to be fine. I mean, Georgia almost lost this game 2 weeks prior. I don't think, I'm not worried about it if I'm Ole Miss. I think they go to South Carolina next week and they'll win that game. Their schedule's kind of sneaky brutal now, and they kind of really need to take care of business there because they go to South Carolina, to Ole Miss, or to LSU, Oklahoma at home, at Arkansas, Georgia at home, at Florida, Mississippi State at home. I mean, it's a pretty arduous schedule here, but I don't know. I'm still pretty bullish on Ole Miss, and I don't think everything about them is fraudulent just because Kentucky took them to the mud at home in a silly game that Ole Miss wins. I'm going to do the Hugh Freeze. They win that game 9 times out of 10, Matt Green.
But was there anything fluky about this game?
Oh, yeah. Brock Vandagriff doesn't have that make that play. It's over.
But I'm saying Brock Vandagriff is not a good college quarterback, and he just beat Ole Miss. Also on the road versus at home with the Georgia game, I feel like not that there's any reason, like an excuse for Georgia, but at home, like night game at home, it's at least a little different environment than going on the road. Like I don't know how you can walk away from this game and not think Ole Miss has got serious problems. Like Kentucky's probably like the 6th best team on their conference schedule. Like, and this is the first one they've gotten to. Like that's why this is the first data point that means anything to me. Like, I don't care what they did against Middle Tennessee State or Georgia Southern or Wake Forest. Like, losing to this and Kentucky, yeah, they almost beat Georgia. Maybe they're a little better than we're giving them credit for. But I mean, that would be my biggest takeaway. Like, the Kentucky Wildcats are like 2 points away from having the best resume maybe in all of college football with 2 potential top 10 wins on their schedule. Like, I don't know how you started bashing Kentucky while Ole Miss looks like an absolute just fraud.
I think Ole Miss is going to be fine. I think Kentucky is going to be, like, their schedule is really nice here for a little bit, so maybe not, but goodness gracious. The Kentucky-Tennessee game in Neyland on November 2nd or whatever is going to be brutal for the Kentucky Wildcats. Brutal. Like, I think that's a 48-7 type stink bomb coming with what I've seen.
This is bye week. This is peak bye week talk right here. Tennessee's just watching everybody lose and just like, oh man, we're about to murder them. Oh man, even if they won, who they beat? They beat number 2 Georgia. Oh, we're gonna murder that team. That's peak bye week talk right there.
Auburn throws a pick 6 to blow it late against Oklahoma. Matt Green, another just brutal loss for Hugh Freeze and the Tigers. What say you?
This was one of the more interesting games of the weekend. I was shocked. Like, I think we all knew they were going back to Peyton Thorne. I wasn't shocked they were going back to Peyton Thorne with what we saw from Hank Brown a week ago. But I was just shocked that Peyton Thorne seemed to rechannel his 2022 performance. I can't remember the last time he was good at Michigan State, but whatever year that was. I mean, you saw more big time plays in the past game, and again in this game for Auburn than you saw Tennessee do this to this Oklahoma defense. And I did not have that on my bingo card. Peyton Thorne picking this Oklahoma defense apart. But I mean, you saw Auburn pass game was having a lot of success early in this game. But I mean, I think Michael Hawkins, he was able to keep Oklahoma in it on their side of the ball. But yeah, I mean, after that pick 6, that just totally changed this game. Like, I feel for Peyton Thorne. It's like one of the best games he's played as an Auburn Tiger is kind of remembered for the pick 6 that kind of changed the game late. But yeah, I mean, Auburn looked better than I thought. I was especially after the Arkansas performance a week ago. Like, I was ready to just leave the Auburn Tigers for dead. And maybe you still can, but Oklahoma, this was a pretty huge performance to pull this out. Just it looked like it was over until outscoring them 17-7 in the fourth quarter.
Do you come away feeling better about Oklahoma at all?
I don't know, because they didn't necessarily look good for most of the game. Like, I guess every week that Michael Hawkins Jr. is playing, it's like another week, of maturity, and maybe this Oklahoma team gets a little better, get their feet under them a little more. But I don't know. I was just so impressed with them. I probably came away thinking better of them after losing to Tennessee the way they did, just because the defense was flying around and they looked pretty good. And even though the quarterback play from Jackson Arnold was so bad, you at least thought like, okay, maybe they figured it out. Maybe they found their guy, even if he is inexperienced. But the way Auburn was just getting so many chunk plays on this defense, I don't know. I'm still not sure how good this Oklahoma team is.
Yeah, I go back and forth. I mean, I guess Hawkins is probably going to be fine. I don't know. The offense still is just, there's not a lot of juice there, but they're going to be in every game just because I'm really interested to see how Oklahoma, Texas goes. Because on paper, it seems like Texas should really blow out this iteration of Oklahoma, but I don't know if I see it right now. I don't know, but just a awful loss for Auburn in this one. And I think the loss is going to keep on. This looks like a 3-9 team now. For Auburn. Like I think bowl is out of the question for the Tigers, don't you?
Yeah, mainly because of, like, if you look at this schedule, like all of these, not necessarily key games at home, but like these were home conference games and a non-conference with Cal, but like you don't have that many home conference games, right? Like that's not just an endless list. So to already lose 2 before September ends with Arkansas and Oklahoma, like they're going on the road a lot the rest of the way in the SEC. Like they have Vanderbilt at home and Texas A&M at home. Other than that, they're going at Auburn, they're going at Georgia, they're going at Alabama, at Missouri, at Kentucky. Like they're going to be going on the road a lot. I think they're more than 3-9 because they got Vanderbilt and UL Monroe on here. Like that's got to be 4 wins right there. But no, I'm probably betting against the bowl game. I mean, I think they could beat Kentucky or Texas A&M, or maybe even Missouri. I don't even know about Missouri these days, but I don't know. I'm probably betting against them making a bowl game as well.
Yeah, it's not looking good. You just got to get out of this year and see what happens. But there is going to be so much pressure on the Tigers and Hugh Freeze in year 3 here now because of how much of a disaster year 2 has been. Matt Green, I'm ready to just go ahead and say Notre Dame's making the CFP. Are you?
Probably. Like that Northern Illinois loss was bad. I don't know if they can survive 2 losses. I mean, the schedule doesn't look, just because that Northern Illinois one was so bad, but I feel like it's just the Notre Dame bias, like everyone's preseason 12-team playoff had, however many conference champions and then the at-large, and oh yeah, Notre Dame's going to be in there too. Like everyone pretty much had that. This schedule, I think it's a super just, exaggerated narrative each year that they don't play anybody. I don't know. There seems to just be this percentage of the population that just thinks Notre Dame's schedule is so easy. They don't play a conference championship. Like that's true. But in general, they do have a pretty tough schedule year in and year out. I would say this year is probably one of their weaker ones I've seen in recent years. So, I mean, I don't see anyone before USC on the 12th game of the season that has any business beating this team. So, but Northern Illinois also had no business beating this team. So I would probably guess that they're a playoff team right now. But if they drop one more, I think that Northern Illinois loss is too bad to ignore.
And it's a good win, we should say. Like Louisville, tough team, and Louisville came in there and fought. Like this is one of those games where if you're a fan of Louisville, you're really annoyed because you're 7 for 17 on third down. Notre Dame's 2 for 10. You out yardage them nearly by 200 yards, 437 to 283. Notre Dame only passed for 163 yards and scored 31 points in this game, Matt Green. So Notre Dame is just, I feel like they're just going to keep playing up to their competition and play down to the worst parts of their schedule. But I don't know. To me, I guess Army's undefeated, so we'll see what Army and Navy, they have to go to Navy. Matt Green, both are undefeated right now for the first time since 1945, so maybe those get interesting at Tech. Maybe, I doubt it. Florida State now, definitely not a coin flip game. It might come down to at USC.
I mean, Tech is probably a losable game.
Which one?
Honestly, Georgia Tech is probably a losable game for Notre Dame. I'm not picking them to lose, but that's probably one of the tougher ones. And you look at these next, like Stanford's been decent so far this year, but I mean,
they got blown out by Clemson last night.
Yeah, but I mean, Clemson Tigers look like maybe the best team in the ACC right
That's
now.
enough.
So
No,
I
they
don't know about that, but
We're
yeah, I
not
mean
doing
Stanford. I'm saying they looked better so far through 5 games. They've looked
Yeah.
in like the last 2 or 3 years. That's not saying too much with Stanford, but yeah, I think this schedule is definitely it's definitely possible. They probably should have gone undefeated with this schedule, so it's definitely possible that they escape this at 11-1.
Final thing here, and then we'll run through how we did this weekend. Matt
Hold
Green.
on, before you move on,
yeah.
You're not going to talk about the offensive explosion that was Riley Leonard, sir? Doubled his season passing touchdowns in this one game. Going off, sir.
2 TDs, no picks. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. It feels like Notre Dame's going to get in, and I think Notre Dame's going to get blasted by whoever they play in the first round. But I could be wrong. We still have a long, long way to go before we get there. Final big thing here, Matt Green. I was wrong about Oklahoma State and Colorado. I'm ready to say it. I'm ready to admit when I was wrong. Now that we're here, almost October. Colorado blows out UCF on the road. A huge statement win for them. I think they have the second best odds to win the Big 12 now after that win over UCF, and just a really, really impressive win for Shedeur and Dion and Travis Hunter and company. Will Shepherd had a really good game, and Oklahoma State just gets embarrassed again going to Manhattan, the Little Apple, and Kansas State bounces back in a big way, and Oklahoma State, their playoff dreams, everything else just seems like it's coming crashing down, and Ollie Gordon just can't get it right. So I am ready to officially, kind of like you at Penn State, eject from my Mike Gundy Oklahoma State optimism and give it in the benefit of the doubt. It's over, Matt Green. I'm over on that, and I'm ready to buy into, oh my God, Colorado, BYU might be the 2 favorites to win the Big 12 this year.
I'm definitely with you on, but I guess I was never with you to begin with on Oklahoma State. So yeah, that's probably for the best. Yeah, the Big 12 this week, I just don't know what to expect from this conference week in and week out. And maybe that's what they wanted when they became America's conference. I think most likely we're going to see some 2-loss, 3-loss teams maybe in that conference title game. But yeah, I mean, seeing Arizona upset Utah this past week after what Utah did to Oklahoma State. And what Kansas State did to Arizona, like I don't think we know what this conference is going to be week in and week out. It's getting a little crazy out there.
BYU is 5-0. They scored touchdowns on their first 4 possessions here against Baylor. Dave Aranda now 2-3, 0-2 in the Big 12. I wouldn't feel good if you're Baylor, or if you're Dave Aranda going into the rest of the season. I mean, the Big 12 is just, who had BYU before the year? I was wondering if Kalani Sitake was the first coach fired, Matt Green. Like, it's a huge, I did not see this coming. Jake Retzlaff has been awesome for them. Their defense is legit. I could not believe they're one of college football's best stories. Ashton Jeanty and Boise State are another one, with Jeanty hitting the Heisman pose. They blew out Washington State at home last night. But BYU, man, like, who had BYU being a top 4 seed, potentially hosting or not hosting because they'll get a bye, but like they're a playoff team right now. The playoffs started today, and we're almost in October.
Yeah, I did not have that on my bingo card at all. I didn't understand the hot seat talk coming into the season, so I'll give him that. But yeah, I'm shocked by BYU to this point in the season. But yeah, Ashton Jeanty, what is he averaging? Over 200 yards a game to this point, 13 touchdowns in the first 4 games. This dude has been an absolute just workhorse this year.
It's unbelievable. Like, great stuff all around. But BYU. Great story. Boise State also a great story.
Is that an overreaction on Colorado though? Should they be treated as one of the contenders to win the Big 12 right now?
I think so now. That's a huge win. UCF looked like they were I just think the Big 12 is so down now that you just look at Shedeur in this offense. I think they're just, they have a huge game in 2 weeks. I think they get a bye. And then Kansas State at home, at Arizona. You get Utah at home. You get Oklahoma State at home. This schedule is actually setting up pretty nicely for Colorado now. Kansas sucks. They're 1-4. They go to Kansas. Cincinnati stinks. At Texas Tech, that's winnable. I'm there. I'm starting to. I'm moving forward, Matt Green. We're turning the page. I think Colorado and BYU have a are the two best shots to win the Big 12. Kansas State right there too. Utah, you can never count them out, but Utah is just Cam Rising. At what point do we just say, okay, that's enough. That's enough college football. Like, we just can't do this every week for 2 years. Like, it's enough.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Speaking of enough college football, this guy, I believe he did score a touchdown. Cam McCormick for Miami.
Year 9.
He did score a touchdown, but man, I saw that guy moving. I'm not trying to put this guy on blast, but I'm just looking at like, dude, maybe you need to give up college football. That guy did not move like a D1 college football player. I don't know how many knee surgeries or whatever he's had at this point. He got the touchdown, but he looked like he was struggling. We got to talk about the Miami Hurricanes, sir. On Friday night, is there some fishiness going on in the ACC? Well, what do we make of that final Hail Mary call for them to overturn that final call in the end of the game, where Virginia Tech seemingly won the game with no time left, only to have it overturned?
I think the right call happened, but they did it backwards, where it shouldn't have been called a touchdown to begin with. And they got it right, but I don't think there was enough indisputable evidence to overturn it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think the result was right, but it shouldn't have been called. Like, they just did it. It was all bad. Like, the whole process was bad to get to the right result, if that makes sense.
It felt like this is why the replays go to the conference office. It was like, let's have the conference higher ups look at this. And those people were like, Miami's our golden goose this year, guys. We can't have them lose it in this questionable. It felt like, what was it? Was it Monday night game? Was it Detroit and Green Bay? No, Seattle and somebody with the replacement refs, when you had that one ref saying incomplete and one ref ruling touchdown. It almost felt like one of those type games. It was just so hectic at the end. It felt a little fishy. I'm not gonna lie. Just the fact that they had to review it this way, because I am with you though, in terms of, like, for all intents and purposes, I think the right call was made, because the guy, he goes up and gets it. My thing was, man, he went up and got it, and then when he got to the ground, it didn't hit the ground. So it's like, it feels like a catch. But
I think that the guy being outside and messing with the play and commit, like, it's an automatic incompletion with the Miami play. Like, it is an incompletion by the rule book based on the contact and everything else in the back of the end zone. So
he didn't control it to the ground.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I feel like it was the right call. But in terms of how replays are always officiated, like, there was definitely not sufficient video evidence to overturn the call on the field. No. So that's why it was like, I don't know. It felt, I don't know. But
it's also like, what did you see to call that a touchdown to begin with? That's what I always want to know.
I mean,
like,
the dude did go up and catch it first, and then it's like, maybe there's dual possession on the bottom, and they're fighting for it. It's like, he had it first. That's a touchdown. You know, I mean, if he holds on to that, and they're both just fighting for it, but have their hands on it on the when they're on the ground, that's a touchdown. But it's the fact that once he landed, the ball kind of pops up, and no one really has it. And like you're saying, the Miami dude that's fighting for it, its back is out of bounds. So I think it's kind of a dead ball right there, because he's kind of fighting for it. But yeah, man, it was the Kyron Jones versus Cam Ward. It just felt like a duel we were watching on Friday night. But Miami just barely escapes. But that was a pretty insane game on Friday night. And then last thing I'll say, like the Ole Miss Rebels, we're still kind of waiting on Ohio State to play that legitimate opponent on a game we actually want to watch. But we saw him play Michigan State this week and just blast them. You were talking about Ryan Williams and Julio Jones. No, this Jeremiah Smith is Julio Jones. That guy, like, Marvin Harrison Jr. was great. I feel like Marvin Harrison Jr. was overrated ultimately. Like, how good he was versus how much he was talked about. Like, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, there was other receivers that were just as good as Marvin Harrison Jr. He just kind of had the name recognition, and he gets the invite to New York. He was an elite receiver. Don't get me wrong. Jeremiah Smith, this dude already looks better than Marvin Harrison Jr. He looks like a finished product. Like, he could be drafted 3rd overall in the NFL draft tomorrow. I know the NFL draft isn't tomorrow, but if it was, I would take this guy, maybe 1st overall. I don't know. If you need a wide receiver, he just has an NFL body already. He had just the nasty one-handed catches in this game. Like, that dude is just an absolute, like, he's the best receiver, I don't know, that I've seen come out, and I don't know how long, a decade. Like, I don't want to call him like Megatron, like Calvin Johnson or anything, but this dude is an absolute freak. He looks like the best receiver I've seen. And Julio also wasn't a finished product in college. It was because AJ Green and Julio were kind of the same time. It felt like AJ Green was like the polished, like NFL ready guy as like a freshman, sophomore in college. Julio was the upside guy, and he eventually got to his upside, and he's just an absolute freak of nature. That's what Jeremiah Smith looks like. This guy's the best receiver in college football, as far as I'm concerned, right now.
Well, Matt Green, how did we end up doing this weekend in our pick'em?
All right, the one silver lining for me on the weekend, sir, was the pick'em. So the Georgia Bulldogs didn't get it done, but on the week, we both had a pretty successful week. You went 8-4 overall, and I went 7-5 overall. But against the spread, a little bit different. You went 5-7 against the spread. I went 7-5 against the spread. Finally got back in the win column. It was a few bad weeks in a row there. So solid bounce back there. Zeus, a little bit of a bad beat. Arkansas 3.5 point dog, loses by 4. So that one's a loss. So Zeus is now 2-4 on the season. You are 39-22 overall to my 38-23 overall. And then against the spread, you still have a slightly 26-34-1 to my 23-37-1 against the spread. But those dogs that I picked to lose but cover the spread, I had a pretty good day with on Saturday with Colorado, Kentucky, and Arizona. Unfortunately, I didn't pick any of those teams to actually win the games.
Well, there's always this weekend, Matt Green, because we'll be back here in a couple days. Another great slate ahead of us. Tennessee back under the lights in Fayetteville on Saturday night against the Razorbacks. Georgia, who do you have this week?
Deep South's oldest rivalry on Saturday, Georgia-Auburn in Athens.
Is it really Auburn? Goodness gracious, Auburn. Auburn cannot get out of their own way, man. Yeah,
this Georgia schedule, it's going to be week in and week out. I think this is the 2 weeks you get to catch your breath. You got back-to-back weeks. I mean, Auburn it's Auburn. It's a rivalry game. It's always going to feel big, but you got Auburn, then Mississippi State next week, and then it's then things ramp up a little bit with
Are you going
to Austin,
Didn't you go
Texas.
to Auburn, Georgia 2 years ago?
I did, yeah. The game that Stetson broke that like 60, 70-yard touchdown run. That's what I was thinking when I saw Michael Hawkins Jr. in this game. I was like, this guy doing his best Stetson Bennett impression, running away from that Auburn defense. But yeah, I did go to that game a couple years ago.
Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you in a couple days.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.